Knowledge is power. A logical meaning of life. Sei Lebese. Copyright 2019 Sei Lebese. All rights are reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced in any form or by any means mechanical or electronic, including recordings or tape recordings and photocopying without the prior permission of the owner, excluding fair quotations for purposes of research or review. Acknowledgements. My heartfelt thanks to Dr. Shakir Osman and his daughter Mrs. Ashi Navaluri for editing this book. A special gratitude also goes to Dr. Mafa Makitso who introduced me to Null Writing Club. Without you, this piece of the book wouldn't have seen any light of the day. Lastly but not least importantly, many thanks to my family and teachers from primary level to tertiary level. Your words of encouragement and appreciation have helped in making the publication of this work a reality. Table of Contents. Chapter 1. The Value of Life. Chapter 2. The Meaning of Life. Chapter 3. Why are we here if God doesn't exist? Chapter 4. What if God doesn't exist? And there is no afterlife? Chapter 5. What if God doesn't exist? And there is an afterlife? Chapter 6. Why are we here if God exists? Chapter 7. What if God exists and there is no afterlife? Chapter 8. What if God exists? And there is an afterlife? Chapter 9. What if all of this is wrong? Chapter 10. What remains? Chapter 11. Survival. Chapter 12. Learning. Chapter 13, Thinking. Chapter 14. You're so lost. You don't know you're lost. Chapter 15, Creating your philosophy. Chapter 16, Morality. Chapter 17, Understanding your past. Chapter 18, Understanding the present. Chapter 19, Understanding your future. Chapter 20. What's next? Preface. There's only one possibility. You're wasting your irreplaceable time chasing meaningless goals, and when you die not only will your existence have been in vain but so will all the painful trials and tribulations you've worked so hard to overcome. Therefore, until you know the meaning of life, the most important, the only important, thing you can be doing is trying to answer the question, what is the meaning of life? Of course, it's easy to say you need to know the meaning of life, but if it were that easy to figure it out then we'd all know it already, but we don't. Why is that? Does the mere fact that there isn't a widely accepted answer prove the question is too difficult for us to answer? Or even worse, does it prove life has no meaning? History shows that if we haven't done something it rarely because we can't. It's just that we've been doing it wrong, and all the problem we once believed impossible were, or will be, solved the same way, through the proper use of logic. This problem is no different. The only way to understand the meaning of life is, and always has been, through the use of logic. 135. Chapter 1. The Value of Life. A man who dares to waste an hour of time has not discovered the value of life. Charles Darwin. Believe that life is worth living, and your belief will help create that fact. William James. Imagine yourself sitting on a park bench when a cute little girl walks up to you and demands that you explain everything she needs to know in life right there on the spot. If you choose not to dodge the responsibility by throwing a logic-stopping escape clause at her, where would you begin explaining life? I've relived that scenario in my head a million times, and I still question whether or not I have the right answer, but you have to draw a line in the sand at some point. So here's what I decided: the first thing a young person should know about life is the amount of effort you put into anything you do depends on your motivation, and your motivation depends on understanding the importance of the goal you are trying to accomplish. For example, if someone offered you R1.00 to run across the continent, you wouldn't do it. However, if someone offered you 1 million rands or told you they'd kill you and your whole family if you didn't, then you'd certainly do it. You wouldn't even have to debate with yourself about it or work up the strength. Your motivation would be so strong there wouldn't be a choice. There would only be one path in front of you. Think about how that applies to life in general. If you don't know why life is important or how important life is, then you won't have the proper motivation to take life as seriously as you should. Thus you won't put the appropriate amount of effort into living. Instead, your motivation and priorities will default to immediate, short-sighted, petty, and ultimately meaningless goals, and you'll squander the short time you have here on such trivialities. However, if you truly understand the value of life, you won't have to debate with yourself or work up the strength to sacrifice the petty temptations of the world to pursue life's highest purpose. Your motivation would be so strong there'd only be one choice, one path before you. So the first lesson you need to learn about life is how valuable it is and why. In order to explain the value of life, we need to start from the very beginning, which was about billions years ago, when all the matter and energy in the universe was compacted into an infinitely dense point in space called a singularity. There's a lot we don't yet know about the singularity. We don't know why it was there or how it got there. We don't know whether it had existed forever or if it appeared out of nothing in a specific instant in time. For that matter, we don't know if time or space existed back then in the same way we experience it today. There are theories that it probably didn't. All we've been able to reasonably deduce is that the singularity was there, and in an instant an unknown catalyst caused it, and possibly time and space, to expand to cosmic proportions. This event is commonly known as the Big Bang, though the word bang may be a misnomer. The Big Expansion is often said to be more accurate. Spending your entire life on this planet, it's easy to take yourself for granted while perceiving the beautiful nebulas and globular clusters in the sky as miraculous celestial bodies, but look at Earth from their point of view. You're a celestial body too. In fact, you're even more amazing than the most beautiful astronomical phenomenon. The fact that you, a sentient being, aware of your own existence and capable of self-determination, arose from inanimate matter is as miraculous as the Big Expansion itself. The contradictory nature of your existence raises some more penetrating questions. We don't know why the universe exists at all, but we know that the physical universe is meticulously, mathematically, and consistently designed and behave according to fixed, unwavering rules. Why and how is it that these rules exist? How is it that those rules allowed for the sublimation of living creatures whose bodies are meticulously, mathematically, and consistently designed? Why is heredity mathematically predictable? Chance isn't predictable. So evolution must not be entirely the product of chance. If that's true, then what else could it be the product of? It's been theorized that the universe could have been designed by some form of intelligence. There's no conclusive evidence to back this theory up, but it's not entirely without precedent. After all, we ourselves are intelligent beings who arose from inanimate matter. And in a universe where you can't get something from nothing, it would explain where our intelligence came from. Granted, that still leaves the issue of where the Creator came from, which is no small question. Maybe the Creator existed forever. Of course, if he did, then maybe the universe existed forever as well, but if that were the case, then the universe wouldn't have needed a creator to create it, since it was always there. You can see where speculating about a creator will get you. So we won't get any further into that for now, other than to point out one implication that arises from the existence of a creator. If there was logical intent behind your creation, then your life has an extra source of value. You're valuable to the one who went through billions years of deliberate, calculated work creating you. Regardless of whether or not your parents were the only intelligent beings responsible for bringing you to life, there still aren't words to fully describe how cosmically epic in scale your existence is. And yet, for all the work and purpose that went into bringing you here, you'll only have a handful of decades to be a witness to yourself and all of creation. In a universe where time appears to be infinite, you'll take a finite number of breaths. You'll speak a finite number of words. You'll see a finite number of blades of grass. You'll meet a finite number of people. Every moment of your life that ticks by was the only chance in all of eternity for you to experience that moment. That makes every moment of your life, no matter how mundane it may seem, infinitely rare and thus infinitely valuable. That makes every moment of your life the best moment of your life. Despite the infinite value of life, someday you'll die. Why? What happens after we die? We don't know. We make up explanations about death that make us feel better about it, but the truth of the matter is you don't get to decide what happens after you die. What you believe doesn't change or prove anything. The only thing believing in an after-death scenario proves is you're too weak and afraid to admit your ignorance. You may think you're doing yourself a favor by creating an explanation to hide from your fears behind, but ultimately all your selfing fantasies really accomplish is misleading you in life. Simply putting off worrying about death until the last minute isn't going to help you either, because you won't be able to make the most out of life until you work through the stages of grief over your own mortality. Only then will you be able to soberly accept that you are going to die and get on with making the most of the time you have left in a logical, conscious way. In order to accomplish all of those things, the wisest course of action is to just admit your ignorance and work within the parameters of the unknown. The truth is we don't know what happens after we die. If the simplest answer is the correct one, then our consciousness simply turns off and we cease to exist. If that's true, then we need to ask ourselves, what effect does death have on the value of life? Does it render our lives meaningless? Does it matter what we do in life? Does it mean there are no consequences to our actions? These are all logical concerns, but the evidence points to the conclusion that our situation isn't as grim as it might first appear. We've already established that we exist for an infinitely valuable reason, and what little time we have in life is infinitely valuable. Death doesn't change that. The value of one moment isn't affected by anything that happens, or doesn't happen, afterwards. Furthermore, you don't have to wait until after death to find consequences for our actions. You can call this the rule of immediate karma. The decisions you make and the actions you perform at any given moment shape your experiences immediately. If you fill your life with anger, hatred, pettiness, etc., then that's what you're going to experience in those fleeting, irreplaceable moments of your infinitely valuable existence. It doesn't matter if you're not punished for it later, because you already suffered the consequences of an infinitely negative nature the moment you did it. On the other hand, logical, positive behavior rewards itself immediately in an infinitely valuable way. That's what is on the line. So given the infinitely rare chance to exist and be aware of your own existence, and given the epic scale of miraculous work that went into creating you, and given the fact that there is an infinitely valuable purpose for your existence, and given the possibility that you were created intentionally by an intelligent agent, and given the fleeting amount of time you have to fulfill your purpose in this universe, and given the fact that how you live your life has infinite consequences regardless of whether or not there's an afterlife, the most important thing you can be doing with your life right now is asking yourself, what's the most important thing I can be doing with my life? Chapter 2. The Meaning of Life. The great and glorious masterpiece of humanity is to know how to live with a purpose. Montaigne. For most of human history we have searched for our place in the cosmos. Who are we? What are we? We find that we inhabit an insignificant planet of a humdrum star lost in a galaxy tucked away in some forgotten corner of a universe in which there are far more galaxies than people. We make our world significant by the courage of our questions, and by the depth of our answers. Carl Sagan. If you don't know the meaning of life, then you can't be consciously working towards fulfilling it. If you're not working towards fulfilling the sole purpose for which you exist, then you need to ask yourself, what are you doing with your life? So let's break the problem down logically. Think of the question, what is the meaning of life, as an equation. Now, you can't solve an equation without knowing the variables, and if you change the variables in any equation you create a whole new equation with a new answer. This means you can't just ask, what's the meaning of life, because there are no variables in that equation to work with. It's like asking, what's the answer to the question? You need to identify the variables in order to finish the question, which should really be stated, what is the meaning of life if? The 3 dots at the end of that sentence represent another reason we've had a hard time answering the question. We can't agree on how to finish stating the question because we can't agree on the variables. In the equation of the meaning of life, the 2 most important variables are also the least agreed upon. They're how the universe came into existence and what happens after we die. In other words, God and the afterlife. These are the keys to solving the problem, since they explain the creation of life and our destiny afterward.